My boyfriend had one rule from the very beginning of our relationship. We eat dinner together at the table every night with our phones in the other room. That was it. That was the rule he told me about maybe 3 weeks into dating, and I remember thinking it was a little intense for someone I barely knew yet. I asked him if he was one of those people with a million rigid rules, and he laughed and said no, just this one. It was the only thing he was serious about. I figured I'd humor him. I didn't realize at the time that it was the most important thing he'd ever tell me about himself. At first, I honestly thought it was kind of inconvenient. I'm a scroll-through dinner person, or I used to be. I'd eat with the TV on, phone in hand, half paying attention to whoever I was with. So the first few times we did his table thing, I kept reaching for a phone that wasn't there, this phantom itch. But he'd just sit across from me and ask about my day, actually ask, and wait for the whole answer. And slowly I got used to it. Dinner became this little pocket of the day where the rest of the world wasn't allowed in. I started looking forward to it more than I expected. I noticed things about him at that table I might have missed otherwise. The way he always asked the follow-up question, not just how was your day, but what happened after that. The way he put his fork down when I was talking, like whatever I was saying deserved his whole attention. I dated people who could sit next to me for an entire evening and not actually see me once. He saw me every single night, on purpose, and I hadn't realized how starved I'd been for that until it was right in front of me. Then, a few months in, we had our first real fight. It was over something genuinely stupid. I think I'd made plans without checking with him, and it spiraled the way first fights do into a bunch of other stuff that had nothing to do with the plans. We were both tired and saying things a little too sharp, and right in the middle of it, the timer for dinner went off. I figured we'd obviously skip the table that night. I was too annoyed to sit across from him and play happy couple. I told him I'd just eat in my room, and he said, no, we eat at the table, especially tonight. I was so irritated I almost laughed, but he set 2 plates down, put both our phones in the other room like always, and sat. So I sat, arms crossed, glaring at my food. We ate in total silence for a few minutes, both of us stubborn. And then, quietly, still looking at his plate, he said, you want to know why I have the rule? I didn't answer, but he told me anyway. He said that when he was growing up, his family fell apart slowly, and the first place it showed was the dinner table. His parents stopped eating together, then stopped eating with him. Dinner became everybody in separate rooms with separate plates and separate screens. And the house just got quieter and colder until one day his dad didn't come home at all. He said the silence at that empty table was the loneliest thing he'd ever felt, and he promised himself that if he ever built a home of his own, no matter how bad a day got, no matter how angry anyone was, the people in it would still sit down and face each other. Because you can be furious with someone and still not abandon them at the table. He said his mom used to call up the stairs that dinner was ready and then end up eating alone when nobody came down, and that the sound of one plate and one fork in a quiet kitchen was something he never wanted to hear again. He'd been carrying that since he was a little kid, this small, terrible piece of evidence that a whole family could dissolve one skipped meal at a time. I stopped being angry somewhere in the middle of that. I reached across and took his hand, and we ended up talking for hours, long after the food was cold, about the fight, and about his family, and about 100 things we'd never gotten to. That was 3 years ago. We still eat at the table every night, phones in the other room, even on the bad days. Especially on the bad days. It turns out the rule was never really about dinner. It was about a kid who learned the hard way what it means when people stop sitting down together and decided he was never going to let it happen again.